Welcome to this second video in this series about the parish of Ockham in Surrey, England. As explained in our first screencast, in 2012 an offshore property developer purchased agricultural land in the heart of the parish of Ockham. It is now asking Guildford Borough Council to take this land out of London's green belt so that it can build houses. It has offered Guildford Borough Council a new town. This presentation focuses on Ockham's history, heritage and houses. This slide sets out the other topics which we hope to cover in future webcasts about the parish of Ockham. History, heritage and houses. People have lived in and around Ockham for at least 2,000 years. In 2013, Bronze Age bracelets, rings and axes were dug up at the former Hoboy Hotel. The Domesday Book of 1086 mentions Ockham when it already had a church and a mill. Ockham's modern history is bound up with the King family. Peter King was a prominent lawyer in the reigns of Queen Anne and George I. For his services, he was created the first Baron Ockham. Some 200 years later, the 8th Baron Ockham was granted the title Earl of Lovelace by Queen Victoria. He modernised most of the houses on his estate before the First World War, using bricks from his brickworks in Longreach. He built the distinctive brick walls in front of the estate cottages, adding his own touch to Ockham's distinctive style. When, following the death of Lady Wentworth, the Ockham Park estate was parcelled up and sold at auction in 1958, 300 years of continuity of ownership and husbandry drew to a close. The auction particulars described the estate as follows: 4,984 acres, comprising 15 attested dairy and mixed farms, numerous small holdings and agricultural lots. Ockham Park, 17 private houses, 75 cottages, apart from farm cottages, including practically the entire village of Ockham, the Hoboy Hotel, etc., etc. This is the 1816 Ordnance Survey map. The present-day settlements and their present-day landscape are all clearly visible on this 200-year-old map. Hyde Farm is clearly visible in the centre of the map. The map shows the settlements around the pasture now known as Three Farms Meadows. Over hundreds of years, villagers and their animals have crossed Three Farms Meadow to Ockham Common to forage for food and materials. As a result, Three Farms Meadow is crisscrossed with footpaths which connect the different settlements with each other and with Ockham Common to the north. The symbiosis of landscape, people and animals created Ockham, Wisley and Hatchford Heaths. These are what are known as lowland as opposed to highland heaths, which are considered rarer than rainforest. This is the 1959 Ordnance Survey map, some 150 years later, around the time when the Ockham Park estate was parcelled up and sold off at auction. All save one of the settlements shown on the 1816 map are present on this map. Hyde Farm in the centre of the 1816 map has vanished. This farm, which had survived for centuries through the Napoleonic Wars and the First World War, was commandeered during the Second World War to serve as a control tower for a grass airstrip. During World War II, air power became the crucial strategic weapon. Brooklands was an important centre for the military aircraft industry, and many of World War II's strategic aeroplanes were designed and built in Surrey. When Vickers, the warplane manufacturer, needed an airstrip to fly out its new aeroplanes, the government commandeered Hyde Farm and the neighbouring farms from the Ockham Park estate so that Vickers could build a grass airstrip on the meadow. In 1942, Three Farms Meadow was commandeered to save Europe from Nazi hegemony. Today, an offshore property developer wishes to use Three Farms Meadow to build houses for profit. This Surrey County Council map shows the former Wisley Airfield. It is located right in the heart of the parish of Ockham. The airfield was built on pasture, forming part of the leases of Hyde, Stratford and Corsair Farms, which were leased from the Ockham Park estate. During World War II, the grass airstrip was used mainly to fly out aeroplanes being built by Vickers in Brooklands. The land around the airstrip continued to be farmed during and after the war. Instead of relinquishing the airstrip after the war, as originally proposed, Vickers preferred to keep the use of it. It continued to build aeroplanes in Brooklands, including a number of famous jet-propelled aircraft. The exhaust from the jet engines set fire to the grass runway, so a concrete runway was put down. Vickers subsequently became part of the British Aircraft Corporation. In 1972, BAC relinquished the lease of Wisley Airfield. The property therefore returned to the Ministry of Defence, which assumed the property of the former wartime Ministry of Supply. The property was later put into the hands of the Property Services Agency. Under the Critchell Down Code, the PSA was obliged to sell the land back to its original owners. So, in 1980, it arranged to sell the land back to the inheritor of the Ockham Park estate, Lord Lytton. The former leaseholders never recovered their leases. A debate took place on the 2nd of December 1980 in the House of Lords concerning the status of the runway. These are extracts from the speech given by Lord Nugent. It is worth quoting at length. Wisley Airfield must be well known to many of us. It lies alongside the Wisley Horticultural Gardens, which we often have much pleasure in visiting. Wisley stands on the western edge of an extensive, attractive area of open common land which lies between Cobham, Ockham and Ripley, the Wisley and Ockham Commons in particular. It lies right in the middle of London's green belt. This area of open land, mostly common land, is the first major stretch of open countryside for the Londoner to enjoy when he comes out of London for the weekend or for the evening in summer. Its preservation from development is crucial to the whole concept of the London Green Belt. The London Green Belt is a belt of land of about 10 to 15 miles in width around Greater London, and it is literally the lungs of London for the Londoner to come out and see a bit of green grass and have the right to walk there. It should be added that the site of the Wisley Airfield lies in the middle of a dense network of footpaths and bridleways linking the Thames with the North Downs. These are all public rights of way. Lord Nugent went on. The history of the airfield is that it was originally requisitioned in wartime in 1943 for wartime purposes, and from that time there has been a clear undertaking that when it was no longer required for these purposes, it would be returned to its pre-war agricultural use. Over the intervening years, this undertaking has been restated from time to time by various government departments who have been responsible for authorising this special occupancy. The local authorities insisted that when the property was sold back to its pre-war owner, Lord Lytton, all the buildings and hardstandings, including the runway, must be removed to ensure a return to its agricultural use before the war and to preserve the general policy of conserving the green belt. More recently, after a good deal of discussion, these conditions were confirmed, and a letter was sent by the PSA on 15th November 1977 to the effect that Wisley Airfield would not be sold until both the buildings and the runway had been removed. Further letters were written in 1978 confirming this, and finally there was a letter from the Junior Minister of the Department of the Environment, Mr. Ken Marks, on 6th March last year, 1979, to the Dorking Member of Parliament, Sir George Sinclair, making the same confirmation. It was thus a great surprise to everybody when the axe fell on 13th July last year with a letter from the PSA stating that the sale would be made with the runway still in situ. My noble friend Lord Onslow will deal in more detail with the particular villainies of the breach. Lord Nugent went on. I come to what I believe is the major objection to this development, which would be a savage breach in Greenbelt conservation policy. Since the 1947 Planning Act, all governments have wholeheartedly supported the conservation of the green belt surrounding the vast area of Greater London. The country and district authorities, with their responsibilities for local planning, have fought a vigorous campaign during the past 3 decades to repel the repeated attacks of developers on both the inside and the outside rim of the green belt. I need hardly remind your lordships that incentive in terms of cash to change the existing agricultural use of the land into residential or industrial development is enormous. Accordingly, the campaign is fought with no holds barred by the developers, and the defence by local authorities has been skillful and resolute over the years, strong in the knowledge that almost invariably, if a developer went to appeal, his proposal to develop would be rejected by the Secretary of State. Turning to the conservation of Ockham's heritage, English Heritage has designated 2 significant areas of the former Ockham Park estate as conservation areas. One of these conservation areas incorporates most of the village of Ripley. Another covers Bridgend, one of the settlements which make up the parish of Ockham. In addition, a substantial number of the old farmhouses and cottages which formed part of the Lovelace estate have been investigated and dated by English Heritage. Following these investigations, it has listed 29 buildings for their special architectural and historic interest. This map is taken from the website British Listed Buildings and shows the names and locations of the 29 listed buildings in Ockham. Ockham's farmhouses and cottages are not remarkable for grandeur. In fact, they are rather ordinary. But the continuity of their history over many centuries and their simplicity capture a lost English rural life. For most of history, the people of Ockham lived far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife and along the cool sequestered vale of life. There are also a number of listed buildings in Wisley. Not the least of these are the offices of the Royal Horticultural Society and its gardens built in 1914. RHS Wisley is said to receive over 1 million visits each year. This slide sets out a selection of the listed buildings in Ockham, giving their names, approximate dates of first construction, and their listing grade. Several of these buildings were built before Christopher Columbus first sailed for the Americas. The listed heritage buildings in Ockham are mostly farmhouses, farm cottages, and barns. They are not the country houses of wealthy city folk, but the ordinary dwellings of country folk who lived and worked the neighbouring land. The surrounding countryside has been shaped by the people who lived in these houses over the past 500 or so years. That countryside forms the setting of the buildings. Ockham Common was used by villagers for hundreds of years as a source of fuel for their fires, bracken for bedding animals, sand and gravel for building, bilberries and mushrooms for food, and grazing for livestock. The many ancient footpaths which link the different settlements of Ockham with Ockham Common are witness to this. The rare lowland heath on Ockham Common was partly created by the villagers and their animals. Three Farms Meadow forms part of the setting for the settlements of Ockham and their common, and is a vital bridge between them all. In October 2013, Guildford Borough Council published the Local Plan Strategy Sites Issues and Options document. This floated the idea of a new town. It proposed just one possible site, Three Farms Meadow. We consider that the inclusion of just this one site unfairly advanced the private interests of this offshore developer and constitutes an example of regulatory capture. This slide is an extract from the Issues and Options publication. Note that it is written to address the issues arising from this specific site rather than generally. Note also it states that the site is 167 hectares in size. Guildford Borough Council has mentioned several different sizes for this site: 167 hectares, 114 hectares, and finally 69 hectares. The Council has declined to publish an analysis of the public responses to the Issues and Options paper. The basis is set out in an email, which states, "We also need to take into account the stage at which this consultation occurred. The Issues and Options consultation did not include any site allocations or proposals. Therefore, there were no sites proposed for development, as the local plan at that stage did not include a spatial development strategy." This slide sets out extracts from the Pegasus Consulting Report commissioned by Guildford Borough Council. It is set out at section 22 of volume 5 of the Countryside and Greenbelt Study, which is part of the evidence base for this local plan. It's worth quoting from these extracts. It is understood that the airfield currently covers an area of approximately 115 hectares. This is very similar to the figure of 110 hectares referred to in the above methodology as being required to accommodate a sustainable new settlement. However, the airfield also includes an area of approximately 17 hectares that relates to an approved composting facility. On balance, the scale of the land lost to the facility, combined with the fact that significant parts of the site cannot accommodate residential development, means that there is doubt as to whether the airfield site, as exists, would be able to deliver an appropriate sustainable new settlement. Consideration has therefore been given to whether additional land could be introduced to the airfield site in order to achieve the scale of development necessary to enable a sustainable form of development. In light of the constraints referred to above and shown on the designation plans, the most viable option for expansion appears to be to the southeast of the airfield within the surroundings of Bridgend Farm. It is not known whether the owners of this land would be willing to include it within the potential development proposals, and this would need to be explored by the Council before any subsequent decisions on proposed allocations are made. The Council did not explore whether the owners of the land to the southeast of the site owned by the Cayman's developer were interested in selling. It included their land within the site for the new town. The plan above is taken from the latest draft local plan as revised on the day it was submitted to the full Council for approval. The size of the site was revised down to 69 hectares. This was necessary because the owners of the adjacent land wrote to protest at the inclusion of their land within the site. In the light of the Pegasus Consulting Report, 69 hectares would have been too small for a, quote, sustainable development. Despite this, and despite being given leading council's opinion that the site was 1. Not available, 2. Too small to be sustainable, 3. Not suitable as forming part of the Metropolitan Green Belt, the council has included the site within the draft local plan. This is the plan on the Cayman's developers website, showing how the site can accommodate, among other things, 2,100 houses, 2 schools, shops, business space, and a traveller's site, all on only 69 hectares. Planning rules make specific provision for the historic environment. The National Planning Policy Framework at paragraph 126 states, local planning authorities should set out in their local plan a positive strategy for the conservation and enjoyment of the historic environment. At paragraph 132 it states, as heritage assets are irreplaceable, any harm or loss should require clear and convincing justification. Substantial harm or loss of a Grade 2 listed building, park or garden should be exceptional. In the draft local plan at Policy 12 it states, designated and undesignated heritage assets and their settings will be conserved and enhanced as appropriate to their significance and importance to local character, distinctiveness, and sense of place. Where new development would have an impact on heritage assets, it should make a positive contribution to local character and distinctiveness, having regard to the significance of the heritage assets and their setting. Tellingly, the local conservation area appraisals have not been completed by Guildford Borough Council. As with a number of other studies, this will not now be complete before the end of the consultation period. It is interesting to see how planning policy has applied to conservation areas and to the green belt. The plan below is from a planning application for a new garage in 2010 inside the Ockham Conservation Area at Bridge End. The proposed new garage measured 5 metres by 6 metres. Planning permission was only required because the property fell inside a conservation area. Guildford Borough Council refused permission for the new garage. It set out the basis for its decision as follows. The garage would result in a disproportionate addition to the dwelling. This would be inappropriate development which, by definition, is harmful to the green belt. No very special circumstances have been put forward to overcome this harm. The green belt rules have served to preserve the special character of Ockham. Property owners have been subject to green belt restrictions for some 40 or 50 years. Restrictions on property rights have served to preserve the character and sense of place of Ockham. But now, a whole new town with 2,100 houses is proposed within 300 metres of the Ockham Conservation Area at Bridge End, with a density of 12 plus houses per acre, in the centre of the parish between all the constituent settlements. To permit this, it is proposed to take a swathe of Ockham out of the green belt. The proposed change of policy is not justified by exceptional circumstances, directly prejudicial to property owners outside the rezoned land, and serves only the private interest of the property developer. It represents a capricious moving of the goalposts. Thank you for watching. This video has given you some information about Ockham's history and heritage. The next 2 videos will give information about Ockham's unique wildlife habitats and rare birds and reptiles, and about its working farms. For more information, please visit wisleyactiongroup.co.uk or guildfordgreenbelt.co.uk. Here are some of the publicly available images of a selection of the listed buildings in Ockham.